Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at SpunkyOldBroad1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show. Hi, everyone. Every now and then you meet somebody who's a force, and that is the person who I'm going to be interviewing next. Her name is Rhonda Sher, and she's a nationally recognized expert in business networking and LinkedIn, which I know is still confusing to a lot of people. She's the author of the international best-selling book, Convert Your Connections to Cash and Relations to Revenue, The 2-Minute Networker, The ABCs of LinkedIn, Get LinkedIn or Get Left Out, and How to Avoid the Business Card Pileup, 52 ways to boost your business with business cards. She's an expert at teaching CEOs, realtors, speakers, authors, small business owners, and entrepreneurs how to leverage LinkedIn and convert relationships to revenue. Her natural humor, interactive approach, and 20 years of business experience has brought her into the forefront as a sought-after national keynote speaker and trainer. And she teaches powerful practical techniques and insider secrets to take your profile to profit using LinkedIn, and is the founder of the Sure method to unlock LinkedIn, and has helped hundreds of professionals add hundreds of thousands of dollars to their business using her simple system. Phew, Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gail. Sounds so much better when you read it. I've just been doing it.
Well, it's interesting. Since this is a show for women over 50, I'm always fascinated by the women I interview who are doing such fabulous things who are over 50. And, the other part of it is the stuff they've gone through. I mean, nobody gets to being 50 without having stuff. I call it stuff. And you talk about your divorce. You said you got divorced after a 8-year marriage, 28 years to the love of your life. So, of course, I have to ask you, what happened?
Well, it's kind of funny, Gail. I met my husband when I was 14 years old, literally 14. And it took him a little while, asked me on my first date when I was 19. I was a sophomore in college. And we got married.
5 years, Rhonda. What happened in those 5 years? What took 5 years?
He had another girlfriend. Can you believe it? He had another girlfriend.
Okay.
And the funny story was, it's kind of a cute backstory, because we met at, if you've ever heard of B'nai B'rith, it's a Jewish youth organization.
Right.
So we met through a B'nai B'rith party. In those days, it used to be, you'd say, okay, we need 8 boys that are from the age of, say, 14 to 16, and we'll provide 8 girls. Then there was a parent that supervised it, and 8 boys would show up. So my husband was one of the 8. Now, this is my first exposure to a girl-boy kind of party, right? And I see Bob, and I think, oh my God, this is like the cutest guy I've ever seen. And I still remember, it was funny, we were sitting outside, it was in August, and it was August 11th, 1970. Now, can you imagine, I remember the date?
Wow, yes.
And they were playing Heidi Ho on the background with Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And, I was wearing a pair of cutoff shorts, and he starts taking his hand on my leg, and he's kind of like walking his fingers up my leg, and and I'm shaking like a leaf. So he gets to my knee, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I want to know if your legs go all the way up." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So the funny part of the story was, I did what every 14-year-old girl does after they meet a cute guy. I wrote his phone number in my little book, and then I would call it all the time and hang up, because that's what we did in those days.
And there was no, who was calling? There was no looking at the number on your phone to see who was calling.
Exactly. So I asked my friends, I said, "Oh my God, that guy Bob Sher was so cute. What did he think of me?" And they said, "Oh, he said you were a prude." And so I didn't know what that was. I had to go ask my mother. And all she said was, "Oh, that's a good thing."
I was going to say that's a good thing, right?
So we stayed friends through all those years, and he had another girlfriend. And then when I was 19, it was in between my freshman and sophomore year at college. I was going to school about 100 miles away at UMass Amherst, and he was at UMass Boston. So we had spent the entire day on the beach. Make a long story short, I came home and I said to my mom, I said, I can't believe Bob did not ask me out. I was in my white bikini. You know, I was a skinny, thick kid back then, right? And he called me and he said, hey, I know I saw you at the beach all day, but I forgot to ask you something. And I said, oh, what? And he said, out. Will you go out with me next Friday night? So it took all that time for us to have our very first date.
Wow. So what happened? What happened with the divorce?
So we got married after I graduated college. We got married in 1980. So I was about 24 years old. And we had a really good marriage for a really long time. It took us a very long time to have kids. We were married for 9 years before we had kids. And towards the end, what happened was, and I think you could really understand this, you know, there's this horrible thing called menopause, right? Where our hormones take over and we become people, at least I became somebody that I didn't even recognize and didn't even know that I was going through it. And I was just somebody that, you know, it doesn't matter if you looked at me wrong, I would have cried, I would have screamed. And all my husband wanted was peace and quiet. And while that was happening, there was an entire other collapse of things. My mom had passed away. Our $800,000 home was being short sales for $360,000. We were empty nesting. I had one daughter that was a senior in high school, another that was a sophomore in college, and I had a cancer scare. So and my business had completely flatlined. And you know, it was really a combination of all of that my husband basically said, you know what, this isn't working. And we very amicably divorced. But for me, that was like somebody just pulling the rug out from underneath me. It was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to be single. I don't know how to live alone. I've never lived alone. I went from college in a dorm to living with roommates in an apartment to getting married. Never lived alone. It was so scary.
Wow. You know, it's so funny as I'm listening to you, I'm going through all these old memories of me in my head. I was lucky with menopause. All I did was sweat all the time. And I remember being on stage and just the water was pouring off of me. And people would come up to me on the breaks or at the end, you know, to sign a book or something. And I was just perspiring up a storm. But I didn't have any mood swings. All I did was sweat. And it's so funny because now I don't sweat at all. After chemo, I stopped sweating and I'm back now on chemo and I still don't sweat and I work out every day and I don't sweat. It's just when I get flushed if it's very hot, but I don't sweat. So that's interesting. And then the other part that you were talking about are all the things that, you know, you were going through that you didn't even really talk about. Menopause, you know, and men didn't really know about menopause and what women were going through. So all of those things contributed to that. But of course, now the big question is, what would you tell other women about starting over after 50 in the world of dating?
So the first thing that I would tell you is, and this is probably the most common sense thing, but I would actually say, don't ever give out your cell phone number. Go get a Google phone number or some number that isn't trackable, because not everybody is who they say they are. And the other thing that I would tell women is, before you actually meet with somebody, get on and do a Skype call or a Zoom call or a FaceTime call, so there aren't any surprises before you meet. You know, I know right now we're in this social distancing thing, but I would actually say, do your homework. You know, your time is so precious. You want to make sure that, you know who you want to meet, because that was the one thing I was really clear about. I was on some dating profiles and I literally eliminated about 90% of the male population in my profile. I said, if you're not over 6 feet or over, because I'm 5'11", financially secure, kids 16 or older, if you have kids, non-smoker, moderate drinker, no drugs, spiritual, positive attitude, keep reading. So I eliminated 90% of the male population. You have to know what you want and what you don't want, what your deal breakers are. I think
And
that's the other thing.
people who violated that? Did you
Oh
get?
my God, yes. I could write a whole book on the stories. Yes, 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 yes. Oh
So,
my God. Yeah.
so what you do by going, by really doing a thorough, homework on your guy, and doing a Zoom call or whatever, you still get some surprises, I would assume, when you meet.
Oh yeah. I mean, one guy I met actually told me that he was, let's see, 71, and which was 11 years older than he represented when we originally had, connected, and couldn't understand why I thought that was a problem. It's like
You mean, what did he tell you? What was on his site? That he was 60?
59. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the, and you interviewed him online, correct?
Yeah. We had had conversations back and forth, and, we
But he
had a
didn't
lot.
look 71.
Oh, no, he did not look 71 at all. At all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, women do the same thing though, Rhonda. They'll say they're 60 and really they're 68 or 70. So, I mean, we're all to blame, I guess, on that, men and women, but it's interesting. So, of course, the question now becomes, did you find the one?
So I actually did get engaged in between, which was kind of interesting. I did meet somebody, and we were engaged. We were together for about 3 years, and I went to my complete opposite. And what I learned from that were probably all the lessons. I like to say that the 6 years I was divorced was the gift wrapped in sandpaper, because what I learned was more about myself than anything else. Um, One of my really good friends, I wish I met her after the divorce. But one of my really good friends taught me something that she did during her divorce, which I absolutely love and wish I had followed, called the 100-hour rule. Have you ever heard of that, Gail?
No, I haven't.
So the 100-hour rule goes like this. When you meet somebody and you're dating, and you know that you want to have a second date with that person, and they know they want to have one with you, you tell them that you have something called the 100-hour rule, and they'll say, oh, what's that? Well, the 100-hour rule is we don't get to sleep together until we've spent 100 hours together. And what happens is the guy starts to keep track of the 100 hours. So he'll say, oh, well, okay, we were on the phone for 2 hours. Does that count? Sure. We were texting for 2 hours. Does that count? Sure. Well, I slept on your couch the other night because I didn't want to drive home. Does that count? And they start counting. So by the time they get to 50 hours, you know whether you want to go the other 50, but what they're really doing is they're getting to know you, because when you sleep with somebody, everything changes, the hormones, the chemicals, and you don't really get to know that person on a deep emotional level because the physical kicks in. So that's one of the things that I wish I knew, which was, and I'm actually going to write the book with my friend because I think it's so powerful.
Wow, that's interesting. The other thing, that you said, which I found interesting, was, never having lived alone. When I went off to college, I did live alone. I mean, wasn't a dorm for a while, but I was not a dorm type person. And somehow I always finagled my way out of the dorm, even though back in the 50s, that was like illegal. You got thrown out of school for that. But I somehow finagled it, and I always lived alone and liked it. And then I did get roommates when I moved to Florida, simply because I couldn't afford living alone. And then now, since I've been widowed, and it's been 12 years, I live alone again. And I think I would be lonely, except I've always had animals. I love animals. And I've had dogs, I've had cats. Now I'm down to 2 cats. But when we were married, and I was married for 45 years before he passed away, I had the 3 kids. I had 5 dogs and 3 cats, and it was a total zoo. But I loved every minute of it. And I just and the 3 criteria I have, even though this is certainly not enough, but the 3 criteria I have are they can't smoke. They must have a sense of humor, and they must love animals. Those are my 3 criteria. But it's very interesting what you're saying. So what were some of the other lessons that you learned? Anything that you learned while you were single that you want to share with us SOBs?
Yeah, one of the things that I learned was to have somebody that you could call. So when you go out to meet somebody new or you have a date, if you're living alone, find a friend that you can call at any time, day or night, and say, listen, I'm home safe, or I need you. Have that person that's your emergency person. And I think that's really critical, because one of the things that scared me the most was, what if I didn't make it home? Who would know? And how that came about was, I remember I had a really fun night at the Orange County Fair, gone to a really cool music thing. And the guy just, I met him there because I lived about an hour from where it was. And at the end I left and he said, okay, well, I had a nice time. Good night. And I drive home and I thought, well, doesn't he want me to call him when I get home just to make sure that I got home safe? And that was a huge wake-up call for me. And along the way, I had met somebody for coffee, and we instantly said, you know what, let's be friends. We knew that we were meant to be friends, and it wasn't going to be anything romantic, and we lived very close to each other. So we made an agreement. I said, listen, you know what, I'll be your person, you be my person. Can I call you? Whatever. And so he would be my check-in. And I think you need to find that person, because there's a lot of things that happen, when you're married or you have roommates or whatever. If you don't show up, somebody knows, they care. But when you live alone and it's a new path for you, you find that person and be that person for somebody else that you can check in with. That's one of the other lessons.
But it's very interesting, Rhonda, that you say that you were his check-in person. One would not think that a guy would need a check-in person, but that's very interesting, because I would never have thought about that.
Yeah, well, remember, just for as many, I don't want to say bad dates, but, for as many experiences that we have that are not positive, men have them as well. So there would be evenings when he would go on a date, I would go on a date, and I'd call him, and it would be 8 o'clock, the date's over. And he'd say, oh my gosh, I was just going to call you. And we would compare our stories. I remember the one where the gentleman had said he was slightly overweight. Like, okay, I'm cool with that. What he didn't say was he was sort of a contender for The Biggest Loser, right? Wow. And the thing was, he had such an amazing personality, but there was no physical chemistry there at all.
Right. You said another thing, though. You said don't give out your cell phone number, but so many people today don't have landlines, and all they have is their cell phone. So what do you do in a situation like that?
You get a Google phone number, because Google phone numbers can't be traced. If you have a Google phone number, you can't find where somebody lives. You can't track that Google number. And there's other services too that you can do the same thing. And the cool thing about the Google phone number is it announces who's calling, and then you get to decide whether you want to take the call or let it go to voicemail, listen to it, and jump in the middle of it.
Now I know why people say who's calling when I do call a number and I get a Google thing. I understand now. I thought, they're screening their calls. They don't want to talk to me. Got it. Okay. So what would you say is the biggest gift or lesson from being divorced? Because a lot of people don't consider there is a gift or a lesson.
Yeah, that's very true. And for me, every person that I met along the way taught me something about myself that I couldn't see. I learned once that you can't see something in somebody else that doesn't exist in you. So if you've ever met somebody and they annoy you no end and you don't know why, it's because there's something in you that you recognize in them that you don't like about yourself. So what I would say is look at every person and see what they're bringing to teach you, because everybody's a teacher for you. Does that make
Wow,
sense?
that's really true. You know, that's so true. I've heard that before, that what you don't like in somebody else is something that you don't like in yourself. And I've never really sat down long enough to figure that out for myself. And maybe that's something I should do. I just get along with people so well, but there are people that kind of tick you off a little bit. And I never stop to think about, Gail, is that part of what's going on in you? So that's a very good point. But you also you had to rebuild your business
I did.
because you said it kind of collapsed. Everything was happening at the same time. Um, what was the hardest part of rebuilding your business?
First of all, it was figuring out what's my superpower. I had to figure out what my superpower was. And I know that's an overused term, but for me, my superpower was that I was a connector. I'd always been connecting people with other people and other resources. And I realized that if I used LinkedIn, which I was an expert at, I could create any kind of a business because there was no shortage of people to connect with. As long as I came with the mindset that I wasn't selling, I was serving. So instead of going back to doing and training LinkedIn and networking, which is what I had been doing, because the market had pretty much gone flat in those days, I went and got a life insurance license and I used LinkedIn to find clients. And within 6 weeks, I was making $6,000. And within a year, I was doing six figures. So it was really just tapping into the resources and the tools. Now, I didn't love life insurance. I actually did very well, but didn't like it. So I left it and went back to doing what I was doing, but it was finding that vehicle. And that's what really got me on the road to creating an income, being able to be financially independent, and at the same time, helping people.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, it's funny the way life works out, and with everything that happened to you, you created a whole new life for yourself, and you created a whole new business for yourself, and you learned so much about yourself at the same time. So,
We left out the best part though, Gail. I remarried my ex-husband at the end of it. So 4 years ago, I remarried Bob through a series of just amazing things. So I lovingly refer to him as my husband, my husband, didn't have to change my name, and the kids are ours.
wow, fantastic. Well, we have about, I think, 2 or 3 minutes left. Can you tell us what precipitated that in that amount of time?
The short version of the story was that my husband got exposed to the Landmark Forum, the Landmark Education platform, through me. I needed a date. I had created a meetup group when I was divorced for couples because nobody would let me in. I was dating, but I wasn't married. So I created a meetup group that went from 5 couples to 80 couples. And the guy that I was dating at the time basically never did anything. So I said, hey, listen, when we broke up, you can't come into this group. So we had an event, and it was a night at the Oscars at someone's house. I needed a date, and I invited my husband, who was my ex. He met somebody there who told him about the Landmark Forum. He did the Landmark Forum, and it changed him to somebody who I didn't recognize because he had never done personal development work. And after he did it, he invited me to do it. And it was through that process, through that community, that we reconnected and said, you know what, let's just try this again. We dated for 6 months, and then we got married again on Valentine's Day weekend with Elvis in 2016, and it's been amazing ever since.
Just amazing story. And I'm sure your kids were thrilled.
No, oh
No,
no, they were
no,
not. Now they're very happy. Back then, they were not happy.
because they blamed him for the divorce.
No, because I was the one who always said no. I was the one that they remembered as that menopausal crazy person. He was always the stable one. So I was the one, and they couldn't double dip anymore. And I was very inconsistent. It took a while to rebuild. It really did. And now it's wonderful. Now it's amazing. But initially, that was the biggest uphill struggle we had, was getting the kids to get on board with us.
Wow. Well, folks, you've heard it all here now. You've heard about the personal side. When we come back from our break, we're going to talk about the business side of Rhonda. And that is fascinating as well because she developed a whole other business, became an expert in LinkedIn, and she now is so in demand for what she does. It's amazing. So stick with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Hi, this is Dr. Gail, and I wanted you to know I have a whole bunch of other things to offer you. If you go to spunkyoldbroad.com, you will see an array of SOB stuff for sale and all our latest products and additions. If you're interested in getting on TV, I have a brand new course, Get on TV. And if you want to start your own business, you'll want my SOB Guide to Business Success. I know you'll love them all. I guarantee it.